Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution mod spotlights, where we take a look at a bunch of different animals and compare them to their fossil counterparts and a bunch of different mods. So quite excited to take a look at that. So today we're going to be starting with a cool little mod pack it's 4 animals. They're all made by PutraDly and Maxley, or PutraDly, however you pronounce that, but of course I'll put them in the description as per usual. So we're going to be starting off with the first species. We've got a really cool little dinosaur here. His name's Telekun, and we'll have a look. Or Telekun. So this is a really cool little dinosaur. It's obscure, but I think is a very interesting animal to talk about. So, Telekun, or however you pronounce it, Telekun, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a genus of basal iguanodont dinosaur. So kind of like a very basal ornithopod. So a really cool guy here. Let's get to take a look at him while we're here. Love him. Lovely little guy. So, he is from the Campanian or Maastrichtian age of the late Cretaceous Fortalese Formation, and is formerly known as the Para Formation in Patagonia, in the Patagonian Lake Vendema and the Austral Basin of the Santa Cruz, Argentina. So, Argentine dinosaur. There's a lot of cool dinosaurs coming out of there. So, he is quite closely related to a bunch of other small little ornithopods, very basal groups, such as Garaspensoria and Anapsistida, I believe how you pronounce that. They're very obscure dinosaurs, but very interesting in terms of the evolution of dinosaurs. So, this was found in 2004, and there was a very extensive description of this guy in 2020, so just last year. So, this guy, as you can see, he looks very vaguely like a Dryosaurus in shape and build, but he has that longer neck. The full body length is estimated to be no more than 4 meters long, and unlike more derived iguanodontians, he still has teeth on the tip of the beak, or the premaxilla, and a first toe. And you can see most of the derived iguanodontians, such as Iguanodon itself, loses this toe and only has the 3 middle toes, which is pretty interesting. The humerus is almost reduced areas of muscle attachment, so that means it didn't have quite as large beefy arms, which is very comparable to other South American or ornithopods, such as Nodohypsilophodon, for example. So they, unlike the ones in more north, they kind of stayed in this Dryosaurus early ornithopod type form mostly, and which is pretty cool. So that's what they're related to. And they also have, mostly noted for this small ovoid plates that are found along the rib cage, and these plates can be about 180 millimeters long, or 7.1 inches, but are very thin and only 3 millimeters thick. And they were present at least on the first 8 ribs, and attaching along the middle portion of a rib and lying flat. And they're actually quite similar to plates that have been seen in other dinosaurs, such as Hypsilophodon, Nanosaurus, Parkasaurus, and Thescelosaurus. But that means that may have been related, and because of the fragilis plate, it's the fact that they may not have always turned to bone in the living animal, so that may be more widespread, so it's kind of like a chance that this is preserved. So this could be more common among basal ornithopods, or even later ornithopods. It just doesn't fossilize that clearly. And also, it seems to be the ecology, Novas and colleagues suggest that these plates may actually be homologous to bunch of eukaryote processes that are strip-like bony projections found on the ribs of animals like tuatara, crocodiles, birds, and some maniraptor and theropods. So that helps ventilate the lungs and working on the rib cage muscles. That kind of helps them breathe better. And not very likely that they were related to defense, because obviously being thin, they're not very stable, strong. And another cool little thing about this guy is that he would have been a small bipedal herbivore and lived with some pretty famous-ish dinosaurs, such as Oricraptor, which is a neovenataurid, and the giant Titanosaur Puertosaurus, who was one of the largest titanosaurs. It's comparable with Argentinosaurus and Dreadnoughtus and things like that. So yeah, it's still a really wonderful animal. So let's get ourselves going. Sorry, I just got like a thing at the back of my throat, but we'll have a look at him drink. Really big fan of this. I'm really liking how he did the neck and the texture. I think the neck texture came out really well. I think he's a cool guy. So this is the first of the 4. We're going to be moving on to the next one. So this is Patagonicus. We'll have a look here. Really cool little animal. Let's have a look at you. Let's let you go and let you have your run. We'll probably meet you over here. But he's coming over here for a drink. See if we can spot him. Let's see him over there. Hee, look at him run! So, Patagonicus means Patagonian claw. Oh, no, he's going for a feast, actually. Oh, keep him there, interesting. I think he's based off the Elaphasaurus. But, Patagonicus, or Patagonian claw, as you can see here, a small genus of theropod dinosaur that is from the Upper Cretaceous of Argentina, and was discovered exposed in the Portazules Formation, the Turian / the Cornian, or Cornacian, however you pronounce that, in the Rio Negrin subgroup in the Negrin Basin of Patagonia, Argentina. The province of Patagonia. So, yeah, interesting little name. Lots of very Spanish and other languagey names that I can't pronounce, but still really cool. So it's known from an incomplete but well-preserved skeleton that includes the skull, also many vertebrae, the coracoids, the parsal forelimb, also the pelvic girdle and the hind limbs. So it is pretty well known, so that's good. And has been classed as an alverosaurid, so it's closely related to animals like Mononicus and the Argentinian Alvarezsaurus. So the Alvarezsaurus is from Argentina. So it is related to a bunch of different animals from across the world. It's a really cool little group. Like also Shuvia, and there was the Hell Creek Alvarezsaurid that was named recently. It was like Triacomimus or something. So that's like Captain Hook's claw or something. It's a name that's hard to pronounce, but yeah. This guy was estimated by Gregorius Paul to be about 1 meter long, weighed about 3.5 kilograms, while in 2016, Laramidi gave it the estimate of about 2.8 meters and 30 kilograms. So quite a bit bigger. Let's have a look at this guy when we're talking about it. Alvarezsaurids are so cool. I really hope we get to see some of these in like the Jurassic World Evolution 2. I'd love to see some smaller dinosaurs. Yep. Okay. Had a nice feed you have. So now we're going to move on to the animal. So this one's a little bit more well known. Really cool animal. So this is going to be also the same pack. Elaphasaurus. So this one's also very similar to a very different animal. It's based on Dinosaurus, just like Telekun, but it's very different relatives. So Elaphasaurus is actually a bit more famous. It's a genus of Ceratosaurian theropod. Oh, there he is. That lived in the late Jurassic of Africa. It's typically found in the Tendaguru Formation. Let's see, get him to drink. Oh, missed that opportunity. So just wait for him to drink. There we are. Look at this wonderful guy. So from the late Jurassic Tendaguru, really wonderful animal. Known from Tanzania, so that would have been Tendaguru. Elaphasaurus is also medium-sized, but also very lightly built, and could grow up to about 6 meters long, or about 20 feet. Morphologically, this dinosaur is significant because it really has like a really long and very shallow body and very shallow chest for its size, and also has very short forelimbs in comparison to its body. And comparing all the phylogeny and stuff, it's most likely that it's a type of ceratosaur, but he actually believed to be a late surviving coelophysid, so it was thought to be related to Coelophysis, but it's more closely related to Ceratosaurus than Coelophysis. But a really interesting guy here. So as I mentioned, long, slender neck. Estimates put about 6 meters or 1.46 meters tall at the hip, and also about 210 kilograms. There are different estimates. Biggest, I think, is about 210 kilograms. Not too big, but is also very interesting in that way. So, as I mentioned, it's a Coelurosaur, and is in its own kind of group called Elaphasauridae, which is another group that's kind of leading into the Noasaurids and Noasaurines. So that would include animals like Lemusaurus would be related to him. It was a very weird ontogeny. It's a very weird animal. I wonder if... I think I've covered him before. He's a very weird animal. But what happens with Lemusaurus, I think, is pretty much the babies pretty much lose their teeth, and then when they grow to adults, they pretty much get a beak. Well, it might be the other way around. I need to be better read on that, but still a really wonderful animal. So this animal's paleobiology is, of course, it was too small to prey on anything big, and it may have been like a sort of pursuit predator, kind of like a cheetah, quote-unquote, hunting smaller ornithopod herbivores. Or it may have suggested that they've been maybe more herbivorous or omnivorous, considering their close relation to Lemusaurus, so it may have been a lot more omnivorous than we first interpreted, which was pretty cool. And the environment of this guy lived in was the Tendaguru Formation, as I mentioned. So that has a lot of very famous dinosaurs, such as Giraffa Titan, and also Dicraeosaurus, Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, also known from there, Kentrosaurus as well. And there's a few other kind of dinosaurs, like the Carcharodontosaurid, Vishapunosaurus, and a lot of close relatives. It's quite similar. It's kind of like a plagiarized version of the Morrison. So they're very similar faunas, since that was really when the continents were only just starting to split apart. So they were very similar kind of faunas on all these different continents that were forming. So, yeah, really wonderful animal. Look at him. How can you not love this guy? Really interesting choice. So, omnivore. So, yep. And last but not least, we've got another pretty cool dinosaur. This is a little bit more famous, Tyrannosaurus. So we're going to go in for some food. Okay, let's got him stopped. Look at this wonderful guy. So this is Tyrannosaurus. Tyrannosaurus, which means sinew lizard, is a genus of medium to large size ornithopod dinosaur that is known from the late Aptian and Albian of the Middle Cretaceous sediments of Western North America, which would have been Lemuria at the time, I believe, which dates to about 115 to 108 million years ago. So these guys were pretty big. They got to about 6.5 to 8 meters long and up to 3 meters tall in a bipedal stance, and had a mass of about 1 to 2 tons, or 1,200 1,000 to 2,000 kilograms. Yep. And it's quite famous. It gets its name Tyrannosaurus because it has these really stiffened bones and like stiffened tendons. Usually ossified tendons. You can see them a lot in other hadrosaurs, but this guy had a pretty prominent, so it kind of gets his name, so it's very sinewy. So the first fossil of these guys were found in Bighorn County, Montana in 1903. And subsequently there have been quite a few different species and stuff found. And they're quite closely related to Dryosauridae, so a very early relative of these guys, and kind of was one of the early relatives to include Iguanodon and other hadrosaurids. So this is kind of an early relative to these guys. And plant life in the habitat that it lived in, it would have eaten a lot of ferns, tree ferns, cycads. A lot of the larger plants would have been gymnosperms, such as conifers and ginkgos, and would have been a low browser. It got up to a height of about 3 meters in the bipedal stance. And this restricted to what the babies would eat, and they had these very powerful, you can see these U-shaped beaks that they used to break up these conifers and other plants to break off and eat them. And even may have eaten fruit, and also leaves and woods. We do have a hadrosaur that I think we have preserved, it ate shellfish, so that could have been a very small part of its diet. So another thing that's very famous about this guy is almost every paleo art image of it is getting hunted by Deinonychus, since there have been preserved sites with Deinonychus that may have been foraging on the carcasses or even hunting these guys, so that's pretty cool. And they seem to be a weird relationship because there's like over 50 sites with this. Only 6 sites of Deinonychus have no trace of Tyrannosaurus, so it's a pretty interesting coincidence. And this is part of the hypothesis that they may have been, Deinonychus may have been a pack hunter, but it could have been just coming to scavenge on food. It's really neither here nor there whether it's considered a predator, pack hunting predator. But also this guy lived in the same environment as everyone's favorite big bag Anthracanthrosaurus. Another really cool thing about the reproduction is that we have seen medullary bone, medullary bone, which is kind of a bone where females will lay like calcium in their bones to make eggs. So we have one specimen that had this tissue, and it's only found in birds that are laying eggs, so it can kind of tell you that's a female. And this Tyrannosaur individual is not at full size at a death of about 8 years old. That means she probably was breeding while she was growing. So that's other very interesting. And there was a histological study that showed that Tyrannosaurus grew quickly early in their life during their subadult ontogeny, but they grew very slowly in the years approaching maturity, unlike other Onogontians. They kind of peaked and kind of more similar to like how we grow, but they were likely breeding in the subadult stage. So as I mentioned, found in all sorts of different formations, such as the clevelandi formation, a very common animal in the late Cretaceous. Its climate, what it lived in, would have been pretty tropical, semi-arid, seasonal kind of that thing, between tropical and subtropical, with a bunch of floodplains and things. So very, very rich habitat to support these large animals. So that's really, really cool. And it seems that they were very adaptable, so it would live with all sorts of animals, live in all sorts of habitats. It lives with Sauroposeidon, Asphodon, also a bunch of other smaller fishes and things. So a very, very complex habitat, because this would have been the time where America was split in two by the Western Ontario Seaway. So yeah, it would have been found in Western North America. It's like a really cool animal. Let's watch him eat. Enough of talking about him. Oh, that's paused. So this was all made, of course, this is part of the almost Herbivore pack by PutraDly and Maxley. So that's kind of like the big pack he has. So now we're moving on to some new animals. A really interesting one, we got another hadrosaur, or ornithopod. This is technically not a hadrosaur. We've got a true hadrosaur. Which is really, really cool. His name's Eolamdo. Let's see where he's going. Look at him go! So let's just wait until he stops and then we'll talk about him. Look at this wonderful guy. He looks like he's ready for a drink. But anyway, we'll talk about him. So, Eolamdo, lambda, which means dawn lambeosaurine. So this guy was a herbivorous hadrosaurid dinosaur that was from the early late Cretaceous of the US, and is known from a single species, Eolamdo Gastornis, named after James Kirkland in named by paleontologist James Kirkland in 1998. So you can see the type specimen of this guy was discovered by Carroll and Ronald Jones in 1993. They gave the species name Carroll Jonesii is kind of a honor of her. And since then, there have been hundreds of bones of this guy found. So it's not the most popular dinosaur, but is a very, very well-known animal. So there's been lots of specimens from all sorts of adults and juveniles. So it's really, really cool. So all the specimens that have been found have come from Utah and are found in the Musasich member of the Cedar Mountain Formation. So this guy was about up to 6 meters long and was a large member of its group, and it's closely related to animals such as Probectosaurus and Chlorodon, so these are the Asian hadrosaurids. Its traits of the skull, vertebrae, and limbs, it shows that it's actually more closely related to the North American Protohedros. And this group is pretty much would represent like this kind of isolated endemic radiation of hadrosaurodons. So that's pretty cool. And despite remaining hadrosaurids, Lambeosaurine hadrosaurs in particular, they're very, very different. So this is a very, very early relative to animals like Lambeosaurus and Corythosaurus. So that tells you a lot about their evolution. It's really, really cool. So this guy had a skull at about 1 meter long, as mentioned, about 6 meters long. Estimates put this guy at about 1 metric ton, or with a hip height of about 2 meters. So not the biggest hadrosaur, but definitely a big animal. See, we know a lot about this guy that I can't put in a whole video, but it's a really basal Lambeosaurine, so related to Parasaurolophus, Lambeosaurus, and Corythosaurus, considered. And then was kind of changed and re-identified as a non-hadrosaurid, which is pretty interesting. And then there's always debates on these kind of things. So I think the latest one, consider it, Hadrosauromorph. So yeah, it's taxonomy in dinosaurs is very complicated because it's just morphology, so I won't get too into that, but it's pretty much generally considered a Lambeosaurine, I believe. I will check that. Well, it was, but now it's actually considered Hadrosauromorpha. So that's interesting. See, reading through and always checking is always good for your information. So we know a lot about its paleobiology as well. So we know from a variety of juveniles that they underwent so we know that they have a pretty well-documented growth rate. You can see the number of teeth actually increase in size as well, the number of teeth as they grow up. So there's 23 teeth in a juvenile and 33 in an adult. And you can see these other increase in the dentries, so from 18 to 22 in juveniles to 25 to 30 in adults. So that kind of shows us how they grew. And the ecosystems these guys lived in were really interesting. They were found in the Musasich deposits, which obviously found largely by teeth. And they're also found with the neovenatid theropod striates, and also found with Richard Sobusia and Paracolodon, a bunch of other really basal and not too well known dinosaurs such as Animal Matrix, or like the Nobosaurid, very cool animal, and also a giant Oviraptorsaur's been discovered in that formation, and along with teeth from Cerasauropods and Ceratopsians. So yeah, really cool animal. I really do like this guy. How can you not like this guy? And I think it's really cool, like reading through the taxonomy of this guy. It was considered, obviously, as I mentioned, a basal Lambeosaurine, and that's what his name means. But it was actually found later that he was a Hadrosauromorpha, so a little more basal. And I think it's really, really interesting to mention in that, because that shows how taxonomy can change, especially in dinosaurs that we think are well known, just because we've got morphology, and they're often known from very poor remains. So obviously it's not a Lambeosaurine anymore, so it probably, you'd assume it changed its name, but it's still a cool name, Eolamdo. Still a really cool animal. So that was done by NetRaptor and KeineKreativitaet. It's got a weird name, Kreativitaet. Cool guy though. Very nice mod. So next we'll be moving on to Gastornis. So we've got Gastornis in here. This will be the next one. A really funny animal. So this is Gastornis, a very, very weird boy. Let's see if we can get him over here. Come on, buddy. That's not who we want to talk to. This is you. Come on, you gonna stand up for me? Come on, yeah. There we are. So really cool guy. This was done by Borcroc and ported by Maxley, I believe. Did a really nice job here. So Gastornis is a very interesting genus of large flightless birds that are found during the late Paleocene and Eocene of the Cenozoic. So right after the dinosaurs went extinct, or the non-avian dinosaurs technically. And there's currently about 3 or 4 different species known, with mainly found around Central Europe, such as England, Belgium, France, and Germany. But there is believed to be one from North America and one from China. So that's pretty interesting. And these guys got pretty big. So the largest known specimen species, such as Gastornis gigantea, could grow to about the same size as the largest moas. So they would have got about 2 meters in height. And the skull of these guys was really huge. So they are very powerfully built, and you can see their beak is very tall and compressed, flattened from side to side. And also just really gives it that charismatic look. And you can see they also have very reduced wings, because obviously they're being so big they can't fly. Very reduced wings, and obviously vaguely similar to the Phorusrhacids or the terror birds, but very interestingly, they are very different relatives. So this guy is actually more closely related, it's an inseriform, so it's more closely related to ducks, geese, and screamers and magpie geese, more closely related to ducks and geese than to the Phorusrhacids from South America. So this is a very different group, and I think that's so interesting. Like you can see the convergent evolution there. They look vaguely similar, but they're very differently related. And there was a big standing debate about their diet. It was often believed, if you watched Walking with Beasts, you would have seen them hunting pro horses like Eohippus and things like that. But it turns out that most likely they were true herbivores. So looking at the carbon isotopes in their bones showed that no evidence there was meat in their diet. And they also the geochemical analysis further revealed the dietary habits that were similar to those of herbivorous dinosaurs and mammals, compared to what is known as fossil carnivores such as Tyrannosaurus. So really the only large major group of carnivorous flightless birds was the Phorusrhacids. These guys were purely herbivores. And what's also really cool is that we have some eggs preserved, such as egg fragments. So they were described as the taxa, or the egg taxa, Ornolithus, which was presumably from Gastornis. So we kind of don't know. Some of the fragments were big enough that we can reconstruct the egg, and the reconstructed egg is by 24 by 10 centimeters, about 9 by 4 inches, with a shell 2.3 to 2.5 millimeters thick, so roughly about half the size of an ostrich egg, and very different in shape. So it's not much more rounded, almost like a torpedo, rather than the big round ostrich eggs. So that's another really cool thing about them. And we actually have some feathers as well. So the plumage of these guys is generally depicted kind of like ratites, like moa, but they actually have pretty big feathers, so more similar to those of proper birds. But that's what they were considered. But it's actually found that the first specimen that was believed to be that was actually plant fibers. But they have found a second possible Gastornis feather from the formation, Green River Formation. And it's pretty obviously looks like a feather. And it was given, and it's pretty huge. It got about 240 millimeters, or 9.4 inches long, and obviously belonged to this gigantic bird. So the extinction of this guy is also quite unclear. They may have competed with mammals, and obviously the mammals getting bigger and getting more competitive might have been a factor. And though they did coexist with a lot of big mammals like pantodonts, but it's very likely that the Paleogene Eocene thermal maximum didn't have much impact, and we just don't know what caused their extinction. But still a really wonderful animal. We'll watch them during. So yeah, as I mentioned, done by Boarcroc and Maxley. Really cool animal to show off. Have a nice drink. So I'm going to be showing off next big guy. So this was done by the same guys who made the Eolamdo. So we've got by NetRaptor and KeineKreativitaet, we have got Amazonosaurus. So going with the theme of lots of South American animals, by the looks of it, we've got Amazonosaurus, that is from the early Cretaceous period of what is known South America. It's a plotykid sauropod, so it's closely related to animals like Diplodocus, and is one of the more derived ones, so probably the ancestor to things like Gorgosaurus and things like that, or related to its ancestors. What are you doing? Are you gonna just put you here? Hey, look at you, really wonderful. Watching and talking about you from here. So yeah, here's Amazonosaurus, lovely guy. So this guy is found from back and tail vertebrae, ribs, and fragments of the pelvis. But it was the only dinosaur that remains identifiable at the generic level from the Heterocapu formation of Mararau, I believe I pronounced it. So it was found from the early Cretaceous, from the Aptian to the Albanian epoch, so about 125 to 100 million years ago, and is found in these, was believed to be found in a river delta, so a big floodplain. So what identified it as a diplodocid was the very tall neural spines, and it's still only vagratory and only known from one specimen, and it's believed to be suggested it's a late surviving member of a line of basal diplodocids. So there were a bunch of diplodocids that lived in South America, such as Amargasaurus, and then you can see that leads into animals like Rebecosaurus. So at least one published cadistic analysis of Amazonosaurus shows it to be more derived than Rebecosaurus, but is basal to Dicraeosaurs and diplodocids, so it's kind of a late surviving member, but as I mentioned, taxonomy can be a bit messy, so it's kind of just one analysis. Still a really cool though. So there are a lot of basal diplodocids that are found in several parts of South America as well as Northern Africa during the early Cretaceous. As we can see, they kind of almost go extinct in the Northern Hemisphere, so that's when they evolve into animals like Amargasaurus, and as you can see here, they evolve into Rebecosaurids such as Nigersaurus and Rebecosaurus. So these guys lived in the early Cretaceous. They would have lived with titanosaurs, so larger sauropods, along with Carcharodontosaurid and Spinosaurus theropods. And during the late Cretaceous, the species would have gone extinct. So I think most of the Rebecosaurids also went extinct during like the middle Cretaceous. Don't quote me on that though. But the titanosaurs kind of took over that niche and became the dominant sauropod until the end of the Cretaceous, so about the end of the dinosaurs. But the predatory groups were also replaced by the Albertosaurid theropods to the southern continent during the late Cretaceous. So a lot of the Carcharodontosaurids would have been the dominant predator, but this guy was around, but then the Carcharodontosaurids kind of faded out, and then the Abelisaurids came up and took over that niche until the end of the Cretaceous. So yeah, really cool guy here. I don't think he's going to go eat, so I think we might just leave him here. Unless we watch him do a thing. So you want to do a thing? Really cool animal. I love this design. I believe this is like based off the only reconstruction of this guy, but I just do enjoy it. So yeah, wonderful animal. So now we're going to move in on to this one is done by, he's done a lot of mods in this one. So KeineKreativitaet, we have got Stokesosaurus. So a really cool guy. I love Stokesosaurus. So we got Stokesosaurus here. He's going to go for a drink. He most likely is. A wonderful fella. Okay, there we are. Let's take a look at him. So, Stokesosaurus. Let's have a look. There we are. Stokesosaurus is a genus of small dinosaur. He's about 3 to 4 meters long, or 10 to 13 feet. It's an early Tyrannosaur theropod dinosaur from the late Jurassic. This guy is found in like the Cleveland dinosaur quarry in Utah. So it's from the Morrison Formation, and is believed to be about 150 million years old. And there's been a few different specimens found here and there, but still a really cool animal. So as I mentioned, it seems to be a very basal member of Tyrannosauridae, or Tyrannosauroida. That's actually pronounced, that's the proper one. So it would have been related to animals like Guanlong, Proceratosaurus, and Sinotyrannus, so a bunch of those really basal groups. So on the way to becoming things like Dilong, and then eventually up to, of course, Tyrannosaurus Rex. So this guy lived in the Morrison Formation, as I mentioned, so it would have been a lot of shallow, like at floodplains and things. It was a semi-arid environment with dry and wet seasons, and there would have been a lot of drainage basins and stuff in the rivers and such, with swampy lowlands, lakes and river channels, and floodplains. So a very, very rich place for a lot of big dinosaurs to live. And speaking of big dinosaurs, this guy, as I mentioned, from the Morrison Formation. There are so many large dinosaurs known from this formation, such as Camarasaurus, Barosaurus, Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, and Brachiosaurus. Also lived with animals such as Torvosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Martiosaurus, Allosaurus, Camptosaurus, and Stegosaurus. So a bunch of different animals, but also Dryosaurus. So very, very full formation. We also see there was a bunch of cool little animals that lived in this, such as bivalves, sharks, rayfin fishes, frogs, salamanders, sphenodonts, so ancient relatives of tuataras, lizards, crocodilomorphs, and a lot of different pterosaurs. Also a bunch of early mammals, such as multituberculates and stuff. And also a lot of the plants in this formation were found to be conifers, such as lots of conifers, also ginkgos, cycads, horsetails, and mosses. So a very interesting animal from a very interesting formation. And probably would have eaten a lot of small animals. Obviously couldn't take down something as big as a Brachiosaurus, but could probably kill a young hatchling Brachiosaurus. It's pretty much just ate anything it can, really. That's what most animals do. Should eat anything they can. So yeah, really wonderful guy. I really love the design, but also his hands his hands are pronated. They need to be supinated, but that's just kind of how Jurassic World evolution, or even just Jurassic World in general works. But yeah, but we have got a really cool last animal. This was done by my boy Wheat, who loves making accurate animals. How can you not love Wheat? We have got Gorgosaurus. So let's see and get him go for a drink. So Gorgosaurus, his name means dreadful lizard. How does that sound? I think it sounds incredible. So this is a genus of Tyrannosaurid dinosaur that is found in the western North America during the late Campanian or the late Cretaceous period, between 76 and 71 million years ago. Fossils of these guys have been found around Canada, but also been found in Alberta and Montana, and there is one species of this guy. We saw the genus Gorgosaurus liberatus, and there have been other species that are referred to the genus, but this is the only one that's kind of stood the test of time. So watch him there. Look at this wonderful guy. I love him. I like love him. Really love the textures he did. It really looks nice. So, like other tyrannosaurids, Gorgosaurus was a bipedal predator and weighed more than 2 metric tons as an adult, with dozens of large sharp teeth, as you can see here. Look at these big sharp boys, of course, and I love the lips. He did some nice lips on this guy. So, and also, as along with other tyrannosaurids, he's got very small arms with 2 claws. So this guy was more closely related to Albertosaurus, and more distantly related to everyone's favorite big bag Tyrannosaurus. And Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus are extremely similar, and often that can cause them to be lumped. But so that means Gorgosaurus would be lumped into Albertosaurus. And these guys got pretty big. The adults reached about 8 to 9 meters long from snout to tail, and estimated the adults would be about 2.5 tons. The largest skull of this guy is also about 99 centimeters long, or 39 inches, just slightly smaller than Spleetosaurus. And you can see he's not too different from other, very, very lithe, more comparable to Albertosaurus, so kind of like this more lean morph of Tyrannosaur. Really, really cool animal. So, as I mentioned, he's a very basal member of Tyrannosauridae. So, sister to Albertosaurus, and then you can see Tyrannosaurines. That includes the Spleetosaurus, also Lythronax, and Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. And we also know a lot about their life history, which is very interesting when compared to Tyrannosaurus. So, they usually compared the life history and growth of the Tyrannosaurus using bone histology. But it seems like these guys, so it's estimated 5 Gorgosaurus specimens were used, and they calculated they would put on about 50 kilograms every year, and during this rapid growth phase, and they would be slower than Tyrannosaurines like the Spleetosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, but actually comparable to Albertosaurus. So what is very interesting is that if you compare that to Tyrannosaurus, it's like Tyrannosaurus is the most extreme example. They went through a huge growth spurt when they were about 18. I think it was 13 to 18. And they just get humongous. But you can see the similar trend in Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus, but they're getting nowhere near as large at the end. So another thing about these guys as well is that they may have spent much of half of their life in a juvenile phase before they get to their near maximum size in the last few years. And you can see this kind of trend in Komodo dragons, because obviously a baby Komodo dragon cannot compete with an adult Komodo dragon, and that can eat them. So what happens is that almost these animals will take 2 niches during their life. So kind of they will be like, it would be like imagining animal going from like a wolf, it'd be going from like a little fox to a wolf to a grizzly bear, kind of as your life. Not obviously they're not that closely related, but it'd be taking the same niches. So a baby one would kind of eat small things, and then by the time they reach about their teen years, maybe even a bit earlier sometimes, they would have got much larger and kind of taken that big apex predator niche. And that helps obviously reduce competition between adults and babies. And you kind of see it in animals that grow so much as they change, such as I mentioned, Komodo dragons. You don't really see it in mammals, because mammals are pretty much born into the adult niche, because when a baby mammal is born, it's nursed by its mother until it pretty much grows and is taken care by its mother until it reaches its adult size. So that's pretty interesting. So to compare to Komodo dragons, a lot of the hatchlings, they're small insectivores, and then they kind of run up in the trees, and then as they will mature, they become these apex predators and take down large vertebrates such as goats and buffalo. And it's also been really interesting. There has been some evidence that these guys formed packs, even in Tyrannosaurus. So it's become common enough. It's obviously debated, but it's become common enough to be a genuine theory that they could have lived in groups. So that's pretty cool. And another thing as well, we also have found a bunch of different pathologies. So we have ones with broken ribs. We have a lot of Tyrannosaurids in general that have bite marks across the face, which is evidence of that it could be probably... There was a paper actually published on this just a couple of days ago, where that showed that they may have used this as kind of like a display thing, or maybe a way to compete for females. So you see a lot of pathologies on their face from face biting. So it's very possible that could have been a social thing. And they're paleoecologists, so they've been found from the Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta, which dates to the Miller Companion, but have also been found from Two Medicine and Judith River. So these guys would have had lived with a bunch of different animals, such as camptosaurs, salamanders, frogs, turtles, also a bunch of little early birds. But the dinosaurs it lived with was ornithomimids, the rosinosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, ornithopods, ankylosaurs with both novosaurids and ankylosaurids, and a lot of small predatory dinosaurs such as oviraptorids, troodonts, and dromaeosaurs. But another animal it lived with was Stokesosaurus. So this is a good example of kind of two different tyrannosaurs living in the same environment, and it's believed they would have niche partitioned, so one may have specialized. It's kind of believed that Tyrannosaurus rex kind of amalgamated them both, but it's believed that I think the larger Stokesosaurus may have fed more on ceratopsians, and the Gorgosaurus may have been, since he's a little bit more light, feed on like slightly leaner animals such as ornithopods, such as like saurolophines, like Edmontosaurus and stuff. So animals like that. So it's potential niche partitioning there, which is pretty interesting. And there have been, which shows is interesting as well, is kind of like maybe how Tyrannosaurus kind of took both those niches. So as I mentioned, because like if you look at a young Tyrannosaurus like Jane, she looks very Albertosaurian, but then as she grows up, you get these very big, obviously, Tyrannosaurus. So very, very interesting. So we'll watch her eat and then we'll end the episode. I know I went on a little bit of a rant, but I think this has kind of just been a bit of a lackluster episode, but I'm still really excited to show these guys off. Really, really wonderful. Again, done by Wheat. Still a really, really awesome mod that he did. I love seeing the textures that he did, and he made it pretty accurate, so I am happy. So yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the episode, so we'll move out from here. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit that little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.